Hello everyone, this is Victor Dantas here from the Zero to Hero Academy. Over the years we have helped multiple professionals either get into the Power Platform market or some of the seasoned professionals within the industry up their game within the low-code technologies. And we are here to announce that we have a special program coming up between March 19th and May 30th. This is the Power Pages and AI Zero to Hero Mentorship Program. Join us, click on the link, access the lessons. You know how we do it. Live lessons on Teams, and then the recorder goes up to YouTube and you can follow if you are in different time zones, but we prefer it to join it live. Connect, ask questions. So go ahead, invite your colleagues, your dad, your mom, your grandpa. Let's everybody join the fun. All right, we'll see you there. Take care. And finally, I wanted to introduce the superhero, Oleksandr. Thank you so much for donating your time to us this week. Although I know him for a while now, I think it's probably 5 years, maybe even more.
Yeah, 5 years or so.
Yeah, we had a chance to finally meet in person this last March. So that was a treat. So really appreciate you for what you do, for you who you are, and your eagerness to always serve the community. I'm excited for this lesson. I already have a question on the lesson, but I will wait for until the end. So take it away. The floor is yours. Thanks, my friend.
So let's get started. So hello, everyone. My name is Oleksandr Olashin. I am a technical architect at Hitachi Solutions Canada, and I'm also Microsoft MVP specialized in Power Pages. I like to develop a lot of custom stuff and specialized in overall development, customizations that are going beyond just Power Pages, but also web development. Also writing a blog called Dancing with CRM, where you can find more about Power Pages, Azure, and stuff like that. And you can find it linked in this page using QR code. Now, without further ado, let's actually focus on the theme for today, which is GitHub Copilot and local development with it. We will learn what is GitHub Copilot, what is use cases. We obviously need to mention the associated cost and is it even suitable for you. Then we talk about different experiences. Is it chat, inline, or CLI? And we will then move to the demo for inline experience. And we'll talk more about chat and CLI in the next session. It's this Thursday, so don't mess it up. And then we'll open the floor for question and answer part. Now, it's also important that I will be checking chat from time to time. So if you have a question, just write it away, and maybe I will answer it before the Q&A session. OK, so what is GitHub Copilot? Well, I really like the definition that it's your AI pair programmer. It's not here to write the code for you or instead of you. It helps you to write a better code or write code quicker. It helps you to find resolutions quicker or to move away from the blockers you have. Now, GitHub Copilot is actually a large language model. It's completely similar to ChatGPT in how it works. It's based on OpenAI Codex system, which was trained in a lot of code that was available for GitHub and it was available for OpenAI as well, which means that it can make a lot of prediction and in general behaves as your standard LLM. So if you use or know how those works, you will find GitHub Copilot pretty similar or pretty familiar. Because it's LLM, it has pretty good use cases in specific scenarios. So its ideal is boilerplate code generator. It can quickly generate a code based on your description or help you get started. Because it's trained on so many and sees so many different variations of the code, it sometimes can even match exactly what you need. It's also ideal for pattern matching. Again, same situation, because it's trained on a wide variety of different codes. It can understand patterns and it can understand different things that quite hard and not human readable, like regex or cron. It's ideal to writing expressions in those. It's also ideal for unit testing. It's amazing to quickly write a unit test. Again, it's not that ideal for us as Power Pages developers, because unit testing is not our things yet, at least. But in more broader terms, it's ideal and it speeds up your development and frees up resources. Because being honest, writing unit tests can be daunting task. Last but certainly not the least is code explanation. Again, because it understands the relationship between different parts of the code and tokens in it, it can explain it in a language that you will understand and also help you to nudge through complex and unfamiliar parts of the code. It's especially ideal if you're starting with a big code base that you don't understand and there is no that much documentation. Because being honest, again, documentation is not the funniest part to build, but we will learn a little later how we can simplify that with Copilot as well. Now, talking about Copilot, we obviously need to start with the cost, because Copilot is not a free product. It is a paid monthly subscription, which starts from $10 a month for individual and goes as high as $39 per month for enterprise. Now, the main question is it worth it? And I would say it highly depends. It highly depends on what is your workload. If you're spending a lot of time writing code or reviewing code, it'll be an ideal solution for you because, being honest, it speeds up my development processes quite a lot. But if you're not working with code that much, or you're more developing more just generic drag and drop components, or basically not as much involved with code, it might not be the best option for you. Now, obviously, you don't need to pay those $10 a month just to try it. GitHub Copilot has a free trial, which I highly encourage you to try it and use, because it will just show you what it can do. You can play with it and also understand will it fit in your work as well. Now, one interesting thing is check with your employer. They might already have GitHub Copilot included. A lot of companies has GitHub Enterprise and even extended version of those, which already includes GitHub Copilot at no additional cost to you. So ask your employer, and maybe you already have an awesome tool. And again, it might not be the best fit for everyone, so choose wisely. Now, with the pricing all the way, let's talk about what are available experiences and how you can interact with Copilot. Well, there are three main experiences so far, which is inline, chat, and CLI. Now, inline experience is quite simple. You are inside your editor of choice, and you're writing down the function. And based on what's written, what comment you have, or what additional context you have, GitHub Copilot finishes the code for you or provides you a suggestion. Now, GitHub Copilot is not available for every conceivable IDE. Currently, the most popular are obviously Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, but it's also available for NeoVim, and it's also available, I think, in IDEA Storm Rider and stuff like that. So first, please check up if your IDE of choice support GitHub Copilot or GitHub Copilot extension. Now, as Power Pages developer, you probably will work with Visual Studio Code as it has the most extensions provided by Microsoft, so this shouldn't be a problem for you. Now, the next experience is a chat experience. And again, it's available as inbuilt extension for Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, or right now, just fairly recently, I think a couple of weeks ago, it was announced as a separate app that you can install on your mobile device and you can interact with. And this is might be familiar experience if you're working, especially with ChatGPT or stuff like that. It's the same exactly thing. You're writing your question and it's answer your question. It has a couple of unique things if you're working, especially with Visual Studio Code, which we'll explore more in the next session. Last but certainly not the least is GitHub Copilot in CLI. Now, this is a combined term because you have basically two experiences as the price of one with CLI. First is GitHub Copilot CLI itself. So GitHub Copilot CLI utility allows you to basically write a command and explain a command inside the CLI. So it's additional installation, it's additional basically extension to your terminal. And second is inbuilt GitHub Copilot CLI in your Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, which you will see this 3-star sign, which I will show you in the next session, that will automatically opens and allows you to explain what commands you're seeing in your terminal. obviously, GitHub Copilot has its limitation. And the first limitation is basically training data highly impact suggestion. Um, of course, OpenAI and GitHub and Microsoft currently expanding their models and trying to retrain and extend those. But existing data, it highly impacts what GitHub Copilot will present to you. So if you're trying to ask a question in the language that is not that familiar to it or not as popular, for example, Cobalt or Fortran, it might not provide you the best possible suggestions. So be aware of that, and also retry your prompts differently, which will lead to different results. Because remember that GitHub Copilot is probabilistic, not deterministic, which means that exactly the same prompt may lead to completely different results because it's generating them on the fly every time. The next thing is Copilot is not a compiler. I really like this phrase from one of the GitHub Copilot team because what it provides you is a suggestion. It doesn't mean that the code that is provided is even right. As any other GPT products, it will suffer from hallucinations. Like I remember when I was trying the GitHub Copilot when it was in early preview, and trying to write something about Power Apps component framework was completely out of the scope because the training data for that does not exist at the moment when it was released. So when I tried to ask it to, it said, yeah, I can write you that code, and generated the code which was completely utter garbage. It looks correct, but it was completely wrong because it does not understand what that is. Now, obviously, it's become better over time, but always remember that and treat the code that GitHub provides you as a suggestion that you obviously need to check, either by running it as an app or checking it on the actual website. But remember, it's almost a suggestion. Last but certainly not the least, it's not a magic. GitHub Copilot will produce results based on your query, on your prompt, on context you're giving, how many examples it has, what code is written on the page, or even other file, which I will show you later. So there are a lot of things, but again, it's not magic. It cannot read your mind. It cannot create something out of nothing. So the more you train, the better your prompts are, more examples, it will yield to better results. Now, without further ado, let's jump to GitHub Copilot demo. And again, hopefully this will work because again, it's probabilistic. So my prompt might yield different results that I expect. So we will start with Visual Studio Code. And I will not go through the process of installing extension. It's pretty easy. You just go to extension, you write GitHub Copilot, and it will also ask you to install GitHub Copilot chat. And you log in with your credentials, and voila, you set up. On the top right, bottom right corner, you will see that there is a small Copilot icon. It is active if you are signed in and if you have Copilot installed. If you don't see this icon, this means after the installation, it means something went wrong. Try to restart your Visual Studio Code or give it a bit more time when it's trying to logging in. If you still don't see it, then check out with GitHub Copilot support. So with that being said, let's see what we can do with GitHub Copilot. Now, let's open. So let's have a context here first. So this is my simple new website that I just created. It's a simple website that just have a couple of pages. The main one is Contact Us page, where we are asking our user for some relative feedback. And then we have admin pages specifically for admin to see and reply to those feedbacks. Now, as you can see, form is pretty simple. It has name, email, subject, feedback type, and a message. And you might notice that email is not required. And we want to change that. We want to, if feedback type changes to an issue, we want to make this field required. So let's see how GitHub Copilot can help us with that. So let's open our file. And yeah, let's start with GitHub Copilot. So as you can see, you already have some preset from GitHub Copilot, which is basically says press Ctrl I to ask GitHub Copilot to do something, or start typing to dismiss. So you can actually remove this message if you don't want to see it in the extension for your GitHub Copilot. But this is one of the ways to interact with GitHub Copilot is press Ctrl+I, which opens this GitHub Copilot prompt menu. So using this prompt menu, you can ask Copilot something or type what it needs to do. The other way to interact with Copilot is actually using comments. So you just write in a comment what you want to achieve, and GitHub Copilot will try to build it based on your comment. One underrated saying that I don't see talking that much often, but I really like, is you can even ask your questions inside those comments, not just ask GitHub Copilot to create something for you. So to do so, you just need to write a comment, then use Q as a question, and just write your question. For example, what does REST stands for? And as you can see, it provides me an answer, a representational state transfer. Now, it's amazing to write a small things, but it might not be ideal if you try to write some bigger questions, because again, you would need to write it to have answer line by line. So it's much better to open GitHub chat for that experience. Now, let's remove it and let's see what we can do with the comments. So let's start with saying create a function to make an email field required if feedback type is equals to issue. Okay, so it's starting to suggest. So let's see what is suggested. So as you can see, function make email required, and then it suggested some code. Now, as you can see, it suggests us to grab feedback type by getElement by ID, grab email by getElement by ID, get the value, and set attribute. The code looks right, but again, it will not work for us because it does not understand the context of our pages. It does not know that we are using jQuery. It does not know the GUIDs. So what is suggested is good, but not good enough. Another underrated option that, again, not a lot of people know is GitHub Copilot generates multiple suggestions, not just one. So if you hover your mouse under the GitHub suggestion, you will see this tab, and it will provide you a limited number of additional suggestions. In our case, as you can see, it has 3 suggestions. So you can put suggestion number 2 and suggestion number 3, which, as you can see, completely changes this one. But there is also another hidden feature that I really like, which called GitHub Copilot suggestion pane. So in reality, it's generated actually more than just 3 suggestions. So we can actually type Ctrl-Enter, and it will open GitHub Copilot suggestion pane, which will suggest much more options based on different parameters. So as you can see, previously, we have only 3 suggestions in this shortcut form, but in reality, GitHub Copilot has 10 suggestions, which we can go through in this screen. Like suggestion 1, which, as you can see, actually uses jQuery, or suggestion 2, which we previously see as suggestion 1, etc., which may be more suitable or less suitable depending on your conditions. But it makes it much faster to find something if you don't know, or if you want to see all possible options. Now, let's say we want to provide some additional context because we don't like what it says. So let's say create a function to make an email field required if feedback type equals to issue, use jQuery. So we want to use jQuery instead. And let's see what the suggestion it will see. So again, as you can see, now it understands that we want to use jQuery, and it uses this. But again, it's not something that it's know how to handle. And again, this page is too empty and doesn't understand the context. So let's make it understand the context. On the portal, I already created admin experience. And for admin experience, I did the same thing. I already wrote the function to make email required. More importantly, I already created function to make fields required and wrote completely the same logic. So let's open that file and see what happened. So let's Let's go back and let's ask it to do this thing again. So create a function to make email required if feedback type is equal to issue. And as you can see, it wrote exactly what we need. It's get our const with actual option set value. It's grabbing our field with the correct name for feedback type. It has correct equal sign, and then it's using our custom make required and make not required running on the correct field. Now, it's not a magic. How does it understand that we want exactly that? Well, one of the things that a lot of people does not understand is GitHub Copilot actually try to guess as much context as it can. And this context is based on everything, not just the current file, but also other open file. GitHub Copilot actually can scan up to, I think, 4 or 5 additional files that are currently open to check if there is additional context that can help it with. So if there are functions that are named the same way, is there a field that are named the same way? Is the code was written somewhere? And it also will use all of that information to create a suggestion for you. So it's not just copied the code that it saw. It suggested me exactly the same code because it saw me using it somewhere else in the file, and it understands that, okay, I want to make this field email required. Well, maybe I want to do the same way in here. So it suggested me because it sees this file and saying, yeah, this is a context. And it can also get a context from a top-level comment. So this might not be the main thing for us as Power Pages developers, but overall, if you work on a project, the good thing is at the top of the file to add the comment for GitHub Copilot or any other basic parser to describe what you're doing in this file, which will make it understand it faster. And for example, if you have multiple files open, it will just skip the files or where comments on the top level will indicate that they have completely separate functionality. Again, not that useful for us, but really useful in a bigger project. Now, one thing also to clarify is, and it's not related to the GitHub Copilot, is about this number. I had recently questions what it is. So it's just a JavaScript notation for big numbers. So if you want to have a 1,000 separator and to be able to read your number more clearly, you can just add an underscore as a separator. So in reality, this one equals this one. It just added for more readability, and yeah, just make it easier. Again, not GitHub Copilot specific, but just something I use to make big numbers more readable and make it easier to work with option set numbers overall. Now, let's move on and let's write additional code. So we make our field required. Now let's add a function. Create function. Oh, actually, let's write on lot of the page. Calls a function to make email required if figure type is equal to issue. Good suggestion. So let's see what it produces. Nice. It will produce a document ready, which will run a function which will make our email required. Okay, this is good. But again, it's not enough. We want to add additional function. And as you can see, it's trying to understand from the context of what you have and what you've written previously, what your next suggestion or your next possible function might be. In this case, it suggests that on a change of the feedback type, calls a function to make email required if feedback type is equal to issue, which is, again, exactly what we want to do. So let's add this comment. And as you can see, it wrote this function. However, other things you need to understand is, as I said previously, training data is important, and the training data really affects suggestions that it presents. What I mean by that is, as you know, change syntax is actually sort of deprecated by jQuery. In newer iteration, it uses new on notation to make it much more consistent. You're not feeling it in Power Pages specifically because jQuery Migrate is installed. But again, the newer version of jQuery try to not use the syntax. And as you can see, this is a syntax that GitHub Copilot uses. Why? Well, this is because it was trained on the version of jQuery that was using this syntax. It might not know about newer syntax or not understand it. So you need to make sure that it will write with the new syntax, you would need to specify it or provide an example for jQuery to understand it. For example, let's just write a simple function on change of our email field to just write it in the console to provide it as an example. So we want to start with our email field. So CRB9 email. And we want on, and we want change. And yeah, we want to run function, but instead of make required, we want to run console log email change. Amazing. Now, it's also another big benefit of GitHub Copilot. As you can see, it quickly generated the code for me. I just removed the parts that I don't need, but I don't need to write a lot of other things. Again, speeding up your developer experience. Now, when we have this example, let's write the same comment and see what will happen. So let's say change of the feedback type, calls a function to make feedback type required. And as you can see, it still uses the previous notation. Why is that? Well, this is because a couple of reasons. So first of all, it might not understand that this is example that we wanted to use instead. The other reason is it's already seen the previous syntax used in similar situation in my different file, which we are using to make feedback type make email required on the change of the feedback type. And in this file, it was written this way. And because it's reusing overall context, it sees that we've written it this way in this file in similar situation, so it uses this example over our training example. Let's see what happens if we will close this file and try the same prompt again. Yeah, as you can see, this time it uses completely new notation based on the sample provided here. And again, this is really important to understand because GitHub Copilot will try to get as much data from multiple files. But if it sees the same thing used multiple times, it will try to use that version because it will think that is how you would like to write it and will disregard some other things. So try to play with it, see which samples you can provide to it and which samples are not ideal. And you will see that the results will be completely different. It's also important to understand that if you start writing the code, again, it will be much easier for Copilot to complete it than starting from the empty page when it not understand what the hell is happening. Now, let's see how the naming also impacts. Because the naming of your variables and the naming of your function really impacts how your GitHub Copilot will behave. The clearer you can write your function name, the clearer you can write your variable, the better results you will have. So let's see. Let's say I want to create a function that will validate our email. So let's say create a function that validates the email field. Now, as you can see, it's created a function using regex. Nice. And it's created a function where you provide an email, it will execute this regex, and it will return the email as written. Now, I don't know about you, but me personally, regex is not on top of my things. I can use it, but read something as complex can be hard. So let's actually ask GitHub Copilot to explain what the hell is happening with this regex, because I would like to know how this function actually validates that this email is a valid email. So you can do it in different ways. You can highlight your code and right-click on it, and you will see that you have this Copilot menu. So Copilot's submenu allows you to do different things with Copilot, and some of those we will move in the next session. But what we are interested in is explain this. Now, explain this will open GitHub Copilot chat, which will pass our regex query that we highlighted, and then it will explain what is happening. And it will tell us exactly which each symbol of this expression means and what it needs to do. So we understand exactly what's happening. So as you can see, the start of the line, the email address must start with the following pattern. This needs to be a separator, similar pattern, matches the dot, etc. So again, great. And as you can see, between 2 and 6 letters, which is domain extension. So for example, if I want to have like a specific domain extension that needs to be only 3 letters, okay, great. Now I see where I need to change the code without fully understanding it, which is amazing. One additional thing to point out, and again, this is not related to GitHub Copilot chat specifically, is where this chat window opened. So not a lot of people know that we actually have a secondary sidebar in Visual Studio Code. So you have the main one on the left, but you can also have an additional one on the right. I prefer things like chat to be on the right, so I can clearly see my full Explorer, my code window, and then my chat window. So to actually add the chat to the sidebar navigation, on the top, you see all these 3 toggles, which toggles different sidebar. And you can toggle secondary sidebar in here to enable or disable it. And then you can just drag and drop your chat from the main sidebar to the secondary sidebar or any other extension, and you will have it here. Again, make it a bit more cleaner experience. Now, going back a bit about asking GitHub Copilot chat a question about this one. In the beginning, I showed you that you can ask your question in line. And in many instances, this is great, but in many, it's not. So let's see what will happen if we will try to use this one in here with inline experience. So let's say, explain what is this reject. Yes. And yeah, it will explain it. But to get the answer, you will need to tap enter. And it will generate a new line for you. Oop. Okay, so it shortcutted it. And again, this is the thing that I was talking, that it sometimes it tries to explain to you in a full answer, exactly as we see in here. Sometimes it will try to shortcut it, as you can see in here, which is, again, might not be ideal. So please use this notation, especially if you want to have, I guess, simple question, and then use chat for more complex questions. Now, another question I hear about GitHub Copilot chat is, well, how can you train? How do you know what GitHub Copilot chat can or cannot do? Well, let's go back a bit to our presentation, and let's talk about GitHub Copilot Adventures. GitHub Copilot Adventures was developed by Microsoft as a way to help you jumpstart your Copilot journey and train with what Copilot can or cannot do. So you can go to ak.ms/Copilot Adventures or just this scan the QR code, and it will go to GitHub repository from Microsoft for Copilot Adventures. Basically, it's a series of coding adventure to learn about different languages, but also about what Copilot can do. It's ideal because it's split on multiple levels. So let me actually open the copy of this repository that I have. And as you can see, all adventures are split to beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And there is Start Here adventure, which is essentially just a warm-up adventure to help you install Copilot on your machine. All adventures are basically split in 3 languages that you can use: C#, JavaScript, and Python. And it's mostly because Microsoft wants to provide you a solution as well if you stuck. So you have a folder for solutions, and this was 3 languages that they were chosen. But you're free to use it with any language of your choice. And I highly recommend it because it's really good and it basically provides you different constraints. For example, the beginner one will try to provide you with some constraints on how to use. For example, um, you can ask GitHub Copilot chat, how can you make this one, use visual representation, basically try to play with GitHub Copilot while solving some interesting coding challenge. So I highly recommend this. Or again, feel free to practice just in your code and see which flow works for you. Now, let's summarize a bit what we learned about GitHub Copilot and make sure that, and actually, let me, oh, quick. Yeah. So make sure that you open files that have relevant context. Again, as much context as you can provide to GitHub Copilot is ideal for it to understand what's happening and what's not. Add top-level comments to describe overall purpose and functionality. Again, it might be not as relevant for us because I doubt you will add the context to every basic form you will have, but it's really useful in more general or broader projects. Then use meaningful names for variables and functions. Again, the clearer you get what you want to receive from your GitHub Copilot, the better the results will be. The difference between function, for example, strip HTML and strip HTML with regex, we completely different outcomes using completely different technology. The same way as we saw that with make email required, with jQuery or without jQuery option. And yeah, try to provide as much context as you can with the comments, including samples. You can even write samples inside your own comment, and it will all help GitHub to understand what do you want from it. And again, feel free to experiment. The benefit of GitHub Copilot is, again, it's probabilistic. So tweaking parameters and even trying the same prompt might yield to better results the more you're trying it. Okay, and for the next one, we will go through more details specifically for a chat, what we can do with a chat that we cannot do with just inline experience, what we can specifically do with documentation, how we can do fixes with GitHub Copilot, and also we talk about CLI and what you can do with it. So, and now I'm open for questions. So yeah, let's see.
Oh, this was really good. I don't think there are questions here in the chat. I may have spaced out a little bit. How did you get to the documentation you were demonstrating on? Okay, GitHub, Microsoft Copilot Adventures. Perfect. All right.
Yes.
That's
And
all I
there's
needed
also
to
a QR
see.
code now on screen.
Awesome. This is awesome. Thanks, Oleksandr. I do have questions, but it's not related to Copilot at this time. But I was just wondering if you or anybody in the chat has played with the modern lists for pages. Have you?
I did. Yeah.
All right. Any personal opinions that we can share here that won't break NDA?
Yeah, so I would say be careful with it. First and foremost, I wouldn't use it so far in production. I had a couple of instances when it was a bit glitchy in terms that it was, especially when you have more rows. In my experience, sometimes there was like it tried to do an infinite scroll, but it's stuttering. So it was a bit weird. I had a couple of instances when it did not recognize additional metadata. So refreshing the page actually helped, surprisingly. I don't know what happened, but and it wasn't a problem with caching because I checked that as well. So, but in general, I like it a lot. I really like where this is going with modern controls. I genuinely would love a bit more control and more extensibility for it, like being able to, the same way as we are just defining entity list, being able to provide some additional configuration like JSON string and stuff. It's not there yet, but that would be awesome. But overall, it will be there, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't use it in production yet.
Yeah, no, that's
how
my
I do it.
dilemma. I'm trying it for a demo that I'm preparing, and I find that a lot of the features that we are used to in the, I don't know if we call it standard list or classic list, so the previous version is not here. And one being the JavaScript that you can bind to it. So it's not there yet. So I'm trying to write code to capture the load event of this list, and it's being a pain. But in any case, yeah, I agree with you. It's time for modern controls. I would expect to see something on the forms side as well. You know, instead of posting a whole form, that we could manage areas of the form being pushed over. But yeah, you would expect. I don't know. This is just my personal opinion. I thought that at least the bare bones of what we were used to would be kept here on this preview, but it is a preview. So to your point,
Yeah.
do not use it in production yet. But yeah, let's wait and see where this goes. Um, Oleksandr, I don't see any questions here. Uh, Control Enter for me is like my new friend. I was not aware of that, so thank you so much for sharing it here. Um, if anyone else has a question, comment, concern, you can either type or maybe unmute yourself and pose the question. If not, we'll wait for Thursday. All right. So Sherry's saying she's gonna have questions when she plays with Copilot Adventures. Already then. Okay. Well, thanks, Oleksandr. Let's hop back on the build channel and see